Hi, and welcome to Stressed, the podcast to develop your stress resilience. Being ambitious and successful while living a happy life is possible. Learn how you can better cope with stress in day-to-day situations by applying tools and techniques that work for you. My name is Julia Arndt, and I'm extremely grateful that you decided to check out my podcast today. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome back to Stressed, the podcast to develop your stress resilience. My name is Julia Arndt, and I'm your podcast host of this show. And if you have been listening to my podcast for a while, you know that every 2 weeks I am recording and publishing an interview with a special interview guest. And in today's podcast episode, we are speaking about 365 days of meditation with Matthew Savarick. I'm really excited to share this podcast episode with you because I'm speaking with Matthew about so many cool things. He has so many amazing things to share, and he has a really unique story to tell as well because he lost his brother to suicide at the age of 8. So he has very early in life started to learn about mental health issues, experienced individual and family therapy sessions, and learned about the inner workings of the mind. And it was also one of the reasons why he decided to do a neuroscience degree, which he got from the University of Florida, and today works for Headspace. And we are talking about, obviously, his experience meditating for 365 days in a row, but about really so much more than that. We're really talking about life, about the different experiences. I'm asking him, for example, the question around if he thinks that meditation is a spiritual practice, because I have been receiving this question more and more often from you, and he has such a unique and cool way to explain why meditation is so helpful to integrate into our day-to-day life that I'm really excited to share this with you. We also talk about the importance of mindset and setting, what he learned along his life journey and his journey meditating for 365 days in a row. We're talking about the importance of mental health awareness, the power of listening, and the ability to love and be loved. And yeah, I'm just so grateful for all of my amazing podcast guests that I have the pleasure to interview for you, because they always show me new ways and open my eyes about mental health awareness and mindfulness, and obviously especially from someone that is working for Headspace. He has a really unique way to explain it all. So super excited to share this with you. As always, you would do me a huge favor if after listening to this podcast you would come and visit my Instagram channel at Blue Mountain Mindfulness and leave a couple of comments under the post of the podcast to share with me what was the biggest takeaway, what really stuck with you, and what you found most powerful. And if you're watching this video right now, if you're watching the YouTube video, then I would love to hear from you as well. And if you have any questions, as always, you can ask them to me, or I can forward them to Matthew if you like. I'm really here for you, and I'm excited to hear what you're learning and what you're taking away from this. So thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest on improving your own mental health and integrating more mindfulness into your life. I wish you a lot of fun and lots of learnings. With gratitude, Julia. Matt, hi. I'm so excited to have you as a podcast interview guest today. Welcome to Stressed. How are you today?
I feel great. Actually, not much stress today. Thank you.
Wonderful. That's good to hear. That's always good to hear. Yeah. And pick us up where you are right now. I always ask my podcast interviewees, because I have so many people from so many different places and companies and continents. So where are you located? What time is it? And what have you been up to today?
Yes. Okay. Wonderful. I will kind of bring you into where I'm at. So the sun is about to set. I'm in sunny South Florida. I'm with my family down here, kind of vacationing. Well, here I am, I guess, working with you, right? Mm-hmm. My mother and my wife's mother live down here in South Florida. Okay. So I'm fortunate enough to be surrounded by loved ones and family. As I was sharing earlier, as we were kind of warming up, It's my birthday tomorrow, so it's a big kind of like birthday trip, right? I'm turning 34, but I'm based in Los Angeles, Santa Monica, working for a company called Headspace, which is widely known as the kind of mindfulness and meditation tool that many people use, used by 50 million people. And my specific role there is building out kind of a workplace function. So Headspace for Work is what we're working on, ranging from, Fortune 500 companies, the Nikes, Adobes, HSBCs, Boston Consulting Groups of the world, all the way down to kind of mom and pop SMBs.
That's really awesome. So you actually combined both questions. Okay, so now I need to regroup. Okay, so you're in South Florida right now, which means you're 3 hours ahead of me, actually, which I wasn't aware of. Happy almost birthday.
Yeah, you too.
I'm turning 33 in 2 days.
I'm turning 34 in 1 day.
Yeah, so we're really close. We were just saying how funny it is that so oftentimes we meet people that are so close by from a birthday perspective.
Yeah.
And okay, so how long are you staying in South Florida?
I will be here for 22 days.
Wow, nice. Are you on paternity leave at the moment?
I'm not on paternity leave, no, but I just had a baby. Well, my wife and I just had a baby. Her name is Sky. She is 16 weeks tomorrow.
Wow.
So so it's kind of like a blend. It's a blend of, some paternity days, but working and coaching and doing things like this with you today.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of wonderful. Yeah.
That's awesome. Really cool. And great. I wanted to talk to you and I wanted to interview you because we actually met on LinkedIn, which is really funny. And I love LinkedIn because I think you can make so many awesome connections with people. And I got really curious about you because you said that you did a 365-day challenge on meditation. Tell us more about what exactly you did there.
Yes. Well, good to meet you, and thanks for reaching out. So my intention was not, I often think about social as like peacocking. I don't know if you've heard this explanation where people talk about like peacock. Look at me, right, showing my feathers. Very seldom do people talk about the shadow, which is kind of the opposite or the converse of that. I don't know if LinkedIn's an appropriate place to talk about like the shadows of it all, but I do think the conversation around mental health and mental health awareness is it's mainstream more than ever, and I'm proud to be part of that conversation. So meditation, at least for me, it was a very, very personal journey. It was, I love how you say it was a challenge, as if I like set out to do that. It started with 1 day, and I looked down, I realized it was 10, and then 100, and then 200, and then we were there. I think the question that I would love to answer, and I'll get to your question in a roundabout way, is more so about positive feedback loops or routines. Our environment and our routines, they're kind of the invisible hand that is guiding our behavior, and we can set them up for success in our life, or they can be detrimental. And I love so much of the work that you're doing in and around that, because people don't even realize that all things in their life, I believe, are kind of dictating joy and fulfillment and contentment and helping them live out their values, or they're simply not. So I wanted to be very intentional about, well, first of all, could I actually do something every single day for a year? Could I do it? That was like the first meta test, right? Then the second test was, what would happen after, not the 365, but along the journey? Because I think it's, you don't do a year and you're like, oh, I'm enlightened and now I got it, right? I'm done.
Yeah.
Similar to a lot of your yoga kind of practice, and I'm sure your own meditative journey, that's exactly what it is, right? Like, just like physical fitness, just like healthy eating, it's a commitment every single day, and we have choices. So for me, it was like, what did I learn? I learned that I could do this, and the perceived pain was nominal compared to the actual action. right? I liken it to jumping into a cold pool or lake. You dance and you hem and haw and you're so nervous, and then you do it and it lasts a second, and you're comfortable. So I think it was a lot like that, where every single day I would stress about it, and be thinking about it a lot. Then as I practiced and I got into a kind of a rhythm, a routine that became part of my life, it was like a non-negotiable for this past year. I realized that doing things to set myself up for success were the key. So have a designated place to sit. And when I say designated place to sit, I'm not talking about cushion. There's no incense. There's no candles. There's nothing. It was a chair.
Yes,
it was a chair.
People, I think, always have like this yogi that is sitting in the, like mega yoga state or meditation with a long beard and
right.
the pointy head.
Yes, I had no robes. I had none of that. Right. It was a chair. But it's important for you to define your environment. I don't love the analogy of the gym, but it's a lot like that, where you kind of, if you're a runner, you have your routine, you have the right shoes that you wear, you got the clothes, you got your route. It's very, very similar to that. And for me, another key component was like having the conversations with the people in my life, that this is something that I was trying to do, not only for social proof and a feedback loop, right? That they would check back in with me, but also to let them know, hey, like my wife, for example, this is something I'm trying to do. And you might giggle and laugh or roll your eyes or want to participate, but this is something, it's a solo journey, at least as far as I see it. Granted, we did some meditations at night and some kind of sleep work. And we certainly did some pregnancy coursework in the Headspace tool. But I think those are the things that I learned. And then the how was I got very prescriptive around my mindset and my setting or my environment. So in the clinical world, we often talk about those two things. We talk about set and setting. So mindset is set, and then setting is your environment. So those are two things that you can control, and that really sets you up for success.
Okay.
There's a researcher out of Stanford named BJ Fogg who built a career on something called tiny habits, where his most famous work is this, how to floss your teeth. And he says, step 1, you got to buy the floss, right? Step 2, the next night, you take the floss out, put it on your counter next to your toothbrush. The third night, step 3, you rip a piece of floss. You're not even flossing yet. You're just kind of preparing yourself and gearing up. And then the next night you floss one tooth, right? That's kind of how he became famous, because at first people say like, this is ridiculous, flossing one tooth. But then you realize that's how you have to work your way up. For most people, these tiny habits work. Others, they rip the Band-Aid off. They quit smoking immediately. They become lifelong meditators, by going to a week-long retreat. For me, it was more of kind of a stepwise process.
Okay.
And then you asked, how has it changed me?
Can I interrupt you once?
Please.
So did you never meditate before you started that journey?
Oh, no. Well, can I actually pause that? Because that's a much longer
answer. And then the other question, and we can just bring them back whenever we think it's right. The other question I have was, did you start with then just like 1 minute of meditation, and then you did 2 minutes, 3 minutes? Okay.
Yeah. Good question. So no, that's still kind of in the how bucket, right? How did I do it?
Okay.
So I committed to doing 10 minutes a day. It feels like forever when you say it out loud and you have no time and we're racing around and our calendars are back to back to back. I think I shared this with you, but I wanted to share kind of here. Bill Gates came to speak at Headspace headquarters, and he said something. He said a lot of brilliant things, but one was, he says, busy is the new stupid, which made me think. I thought he was like speaking directly to me, right? I was like, oh my gosh, like how much of my calendar is full of stuff that, there's a lot of one-on-ones and meetings and stuff that's important. But my mental calendar, how much of it was me telling the world I had no time. I have no time for you, even though here I am, making time or committing time. Um, I think this busy story is a very, very kind of strange thing. And we've seen it over time. There was, when we were growing up, now I know your age. So when we were growing up, there was this kind of like chest puffery around how macho you were to work and grind down your axe until you were burnt out. And there was pride around that. But now we're realizing it's not healthy. It's not smart. It's not good for your mental or physical, emotional state at all. So around that, I stopped with this kind of invisible talk track in my mind that I was too busy. And I started with 10 minutes. I actually started with 10 minutes. The first couple times were challenging. But I did have some experience in meditation and mindfulness. And then I actually worked my way up to 20 minutes a day. So we went from 10 and then 15 and then 20. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's kind of zoom out to the first question, right? Part A was, what's been my experience to date? Mm-hmm. And I think, like you encouraged, the best way to go about this is to just be candid and open and honest, because I think that's where kind of the gold and magic happens, right? Yeah. So for me, I think it's useful to share a little bit about my story, and then I can talk about the path that led me to where I am today, and even why I took this journey. So when I was 8 years old, not that's where my life started, but this is where this specific journey started. My older brother said that he was coming back, and he left and never came back. And that had, as you might imagine, consequences for our family and for me. He suffered from mania, from depression, and he was very capable. He was kind of suffering in silence for a long time. His family knew, we knew, but the folks adjacent to him in his life, even great friends, didn't know. The reason I share that is because at one point it became too much, right? It was overwhelming for him, and he took his own life. Mm-hmm. And I was young. I intellectually understood what had happened. I was not prepped or ready. I mean, I don't know any 8, 9-year-old that's ready to kind of deal, right? Yes. My family kind of splintered and fractured, and it affected all of us in different ways. But that, I would say, the silver lining, if there is one, it put me on a path of introspection, even if I didn't want it. There's really no way when your entire community and your parents' friends, your friends' parents, your teachers, everybody in your life is aware and supporting you, knowing that you and your family are kind of like going through this and hitting rock bottom. People are propping you up. And I think that's what we should all realize, is that everyone's going through stuff. We're all going through stuff. So much of our behavior, I believe, is can be traced directly back to traumatic experiences. And for a long time, I didn't want to think that way, because I do see the world through rather kind of rosy glasses. But I've noticed now, in working with some clients one-on-one, in working with top-tier executives from some of the best brands that we know, in connecting with family members and friends, people are going through stuff. And when, let's see, the first moment I realized, or anybody spoke about this M word, mindfulness, was in an early therapy session. We did like family therapy together. I did one-on-one therapy. So that was just part of the program. Of course, yeah. And it was during a one-on-one session, and the therapist said, Matthew, what you're experiencing is normal. You should lean into your feelings. Don't retreat, right? Like, your feelings are there to tell you something. So listen. And it was the first, as opposed to feeling shame about this stuff, I was like, oh, if I need to cry, I will cry. If I need to scream and yell and run and, let it out, I will. If I need to have a conversation with somebody, there weren't that many barriers built up. I kind of had permission. I was at a point where I didn't have any other way but through it, right? There was kind of no skirting around it.
Yeah.
So from there, I think like that was the first person who ever mentioned the mindfulness word to me. And really at the heart of it, mindfulness, children know mindfulness. They're the ones stopping to smell the flowers. They're the ones who are marveling at the sky and the birds and the ocean, and are not absorbed in their phone. Well, I guess modern day kids might be, but I think adults are the ones who need kind of a realignment per se, where it's like you have a lot of the stuff in you. Just listen. We've lost that listening skill to ourselves, certainly with ourselves and to the world around us. So that was kind of the first time I ever heard about mindfulness. She wasn't recommending that I do anything. She wasn't saying, go do this practice. She was just,
close your eyes.
close your eyes, breathe, place your hand on your heart. No, she was just saying, hey, if you got to cry, cry. We're all in this together. And another thing that she talked about listening, and I know I mentioned it, what happened was when I started listening to the world around me, I realized that even my peers, and I shared this story with you, but I'll repeat it. Even my peers are going through stuff. Mm-hmm. This 10-year-old boy in my class came up to me and said, Matt, I don't know who else to share this with, but, and it doesn't compare to what you went through, but I just lost my family cat and I am like totally distraught. And he was, all bent out of shape and emotional. And in that moment, I realized that there's, it doesn't matter the degree with which we're suffering. If you're having a really bad day and I'm having a really bad day or that's all kind of the same because, our scale, although it might be a little altered, it's like, that's all we know. So when that moment happened, I realized, that there is power in listening. And these lessons, I think, those two things, like one, be compassionate with yourself. Like you have to, there's no other way, right? Or you either accept what is going on in your body, physically, mentally, emotionally, and then you can move on, or you don't, and you're kind of in this like tug of war per se. And then the second was just awareness. Like if we all paused for a moment and listened to our loved ones and our family and our bodies even, I think we would learn a lot. So those were the two early lessons. Mm-hmm. Not that there was a particular practice. Mm-hmm.
Can I ask how old your brother was? I'm really curious about that.
He was 22.
He was 22, yeah.
Yeah. So, I think, well, if anybody's listening out there and I can be a support system in any way or can share, please do not hesitate to reach out. I take this very, very seriously. And it could be something benign, right? You could have gone through a bad breakup or, you're nervous about XYZ. It doesn't matter. We need to be there for one another.
Different reasons. And they're all valid reasons, right?
Right. That's right. That's right.
And so, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to kind of like bleed right into a story about me. Mm-hmm. And I'll weave my own story into this because I think it's useful to learn more about at least how I got to where I am today in terms of following this path, following my heart, listening, saying no to stuff that didn't really ring true, which takes a lot of courage. And an early mentor of mine said, if you're saying no to something that is not right, that means you're opening up to a possible better opportunity, right? So it's like, as opposed to, oh, I might miss this thing, you realize that there could be something better beyond. So let's fast forward to high school. I had a teacher named Miss Leeds who was like the toughest high school chemistry teacher. Everyone was so scared of her. Then I met her, and she's the sweetest lady. She just loved science, right? She just had such a deep respect for science. And I didn't love science. I didn't not love it. It just wasn't like on my top list, But there was something that first day that she said, I don't know exactly what I remember is she taught me about neuroscience in some different ways, but that definitely wasn't the first lesson, right? But what I do remember is, oh, this lady is widely misunderstood. She's I think people respected her for being a great teacher and loving science, but she was known as like the hard teacher just because she loved it and had a
because she was a science teacher. I feel like they
science.
just have that stigma around them, right?
Yeah, right. That or math, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So she, I think she was another one who started. There were early bubblings that we knew for certainty that you could change your brain just the way we knew you could change your body. So it was like for a long time, I think people have talked about like mind and body as separate things, or spirit, like the tether between the two. She just talked about organisms as kind of a whole system and homeostasis and balance in a scientific way. And I gravitated to that kind of this order. It was like order within chaos, some predictability in chemistry, but there was also um, some unknowns. She talked about neuroscience where it's like the physiology, the structures of your brain make sense, right? Like we know how that works. It's not like your arm. Your arm has certain musculature and vessels and um, bones and tendons and ligaments, and it's very predictable in how it will work. The physiology of your brain is coupled with something called psychology. And I knew this, but it was like the way she spoke about these two things and the unknown, or the gray area of the gray matter in your brain, was something that just like it sparked something in me. And I looked at her and I was like captivated by science. Her love for it, but also I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I was able to relate that to my own experience. Like I think I have a brain that's working correctly. I've been accused of having hyperactivity and other things like that. Um, I knew my brother's was not working the way it's meant to, and I started to kind of like dig there, which led me down the path of studying that in college. And then it kind of opened my eyes to a whole world out there where here I am sitting in a role at Headspace where it blends the both worlds of science and tech, and then there's this added layer of workplace, which is pretty special. We know that that's where most people spend most of their life, and we know that it's like a top 5 reason people are stressed, if not top 3. So I think that's where I could help bring some awareness to mental health. Just remove the stigma, because it might sound silly, but somebody who has a cut on their arm that's kind of revered way differently than someone who might have something going on with their mental state. We for some reason, because maybe it's because you can see it and it's gory, right? And you maybe can understand it better. But I would say it's just as detrimental to somebody.
For sure.
Yeah, to have kind of a mental,
or maybe even more
issue.
so because you can't see it. So people, I in my experience, don't like to talk about it as much because you can't see it. So people are like, are they like? It's always just kind of that crazy stamp. It's like, oh, they're crazy. And so people don't talk about it, and I think that's why often it gets actually worse, because people feel alone and they have all these thoughts and they overanalyze and they overthink and they don't know what to do, but they don't search for help, and they just kind of go down this spiral.
Yeah,
that's not
right. I think you're right. Like the shame of it is a very real thing, and it's so funny how things that are so similar sit so close together. So, for example, the immense pride that people have around working 100-hour weeks or whatever sits so closely to this burnout or overwhelm. Interesting.
Yeah. So one of the questions that I'm getting a lot at the moment, and that I think would be so helpful to hear from you is, for a lot of people, meditation equals spirituality and something more almost religious. Maybe two questions. First of all, do you think about it that way? Do you think meditation equals spirituality? And then the second part of the question is, how can we make it unspiritual? Because I don't believe it's spiritual. And a lot of people are like reaching out to me. I just had a listener question the other day about, do we need to turn to spirituality to manage stress? And I said, no, absolutely not. So yeah, I'm just going to leave that open.
It's a very appropriate question, and I think it makes sense, right? People, and anything that is in this kind of gray zone of spirituality or religion or something that is intangible, I think people lump together. Let's like define some things, right? So I know spirituality is used loosely to describe kind of this bridge between religious and secular. There's, some people might say, oh, I don't believe in XYZ, but I believe in 1, 2, 3, and I am a spiritual person. So I think, I think that's the time we live in where people identify with that more. I can only speak from like my experience and a rather secular standpoint. It's appropriate for people to think that, even if you kind of like Google, a simple Google search on meditation, you look at the images that come up, there are people, sitting cross-legged, burning incense, wearing a robe with a goat on a mountaintop, and they're enshrouded in different things. So there has always been, I think, in all religions, an opportunity to have like me time, well, like bring it into the modern day, me time and quiet time and silence and kind of reverence, right? But at least what I practice, I guess a good parallel would be yoga, right? Where people say, oh, this is rooted in some sort of religious tradition. But really, if you called it something else, it wouldn't, and you didn't use some of the other Sanskrit terms, it would not feel any other way but a workout class.
Yeah.
Right. So I think it's, in the case of like a yoga studio, I think there is a fine line, because people do want to walk that line of spirituality, but also get a workout. I think it was just like, if it was called like bro stretching, nobody would show up, right? It would like be like super secular, make sure it was like only for the macho. I don't know if folks would show up. So I think in terms of,
maybe because people identify with that part.
Maybe, right. No, that's true. I don't think in like black and white per se, and you might say that that some sort of music, because it reminds you of, some chanting, could feel like spiritual, but really what it is some, basic like synth music to go to sleep, right? But in the world of secularized meditation and mindfulness, there's a full spectrum. You have people who I think are doing some of that, like chanting, and there's different mantras anchored in Buddhist tradition. At least what Headspace, and I know Headspace well, I can just speak to that. What we talk about is mindfulness meditation. So as far as we define it, it's using something that's with you all the time as an anchor, right? Meditation, I think, does have stigma enshrouded in it. Just historically, it has been around for millennia, and it has kind of had a religious or a spiritual rather tinge to it. But what we're referencing is just breath work, right? Like you find an anchor, whether it's your sit bones on the chair, your feet in your shoes, or your feet on the floor, or your breath, and that is your anchor point, aka that's what you keep coming back to. So the whole thing, it doesn't matter what tool you use, what class you're in. I think if you were to sum it up in a sentence, it's really training your attention. The practice is either sitting or lying or walking, right? You can be doing it active. So it doesn't matter kind of the medium through which you're moving or not moving. You find an anchor point. Some folks use a mantra, a saying. Some folks use a word. Some people can stare at a certain object, and your thoughts and feelings come. And the whole goal is to bring your focus back to your anchor. So we'll use breath as an example. You certainly observe the world around you. You kind of activate your senses. You'll be listening to potentially birds chirping. Again, that's like a focus point. You might do a body scan to check in and connect with your body. This is kind of like a mind-body exercise to bridge the gap. And then most meditations that I've seen anchor to something. So, for example, if we were doing kind of a meditation now, there would be some sort of guide. There is unguided, I think, in a more kind of advanced setting, but generally a guide who is encouraging you to breathe and come back to that breath. If your mind wanders, it goes to your to-do list. It goes to, you might be hungry or thirsty. You just qualify it as a thought or a feeling, and you come back to your breath. And that's the whole practice. So in time, your awareness grows, and you're able to, not when you're meditating, but in the world outside of your own practice, you're able to employ those techniques. So, to kind of bring it into like the scientific world, we talk about stimulus and response. That's, something happens in chemistry. We'll bring it back to mislead. Something happens, either a catalyst is added or heat is added or an enzyme is added to speed up something. And then there's a reaction. In humans, there is space where you can choose between stimulus and response. When you're sitting in traffic and someone cuts you off, you have a choice how to respond. When someone sends you a nasty email, through practice, you're able to actually pause. And it might sound like so far off and unimaginable, but there are some times where these like what appear to be rather aggressive or off-putting things in my life, I'm able to, through practice, you just reframe it. You realize like, what, I'm actually thankful for this nasty email, believe it or not, because I don't often get nasty emails. And this forced me to put my practice into practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I love how you just explained that. Thank you. I think that's such a great explanation just of what meditation is and what it helps us, what it serves us for in the day-to-day life. Two questions that came up. First question. So did you use Headspace for the 365 days or did
I
you
use Headspace every day.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to stack the deck in my favor, AKA set up all the things so I can succeed. So as I matured in my year-long journey, it started as identifying a chair and telling, my friends and family and wife that I was doing this thing, right? And even work. I said like, hey, I'm doing this thing. I didn't need permission per se, but it was more so to just let them know, right? I think over time, there is this notion of self-fulfilling prophecy. If I say I'm going to do this, I think I'm more likely to do it. So it evolved in that the chair, I didn't love where the chair was initially placed, so I moved it. I had a pair of headphones that just stayed there because that was often something where I'd sit down and I'd be like, oh no, my headphones, I got to go find. So as opposed to having to scramble, I just sat that right there. And then I realized that the trigger that would, certainly was in the morning, but the trigger for me was making tea. So I would get up, let the dog out. Now it was like time to take care of a baby, right? Get the baby up, change her, get her situated, make a cup of tea. So the tea was the trigger, and then I would sit down. I think what has happened, I don't want to speak more broadly, but I could just say, at least for my peer group and in my world, I think people read books, they listen to podcasts, here we are, they watch videos online, they're taking notes, they're studying, they're sharing with friends, they're planning, they're marking things on their calendar, they're getting motivated to do stuff, they talk a lot. People just have to jump in and do it. just do it, right? Like anything else, there's always going to be the next meditation app out there. There's always, I promise you, the keto diet is not the latest diet. There's going to be a new one that's going to come out, right? And I'm not knocking diets. It's just choosing your lane, choosing your book, choosing your school of thought, and running with it. Because, yes, similar to physical fitness, like the next fad will be something beyond CrossFit and yoga. Who knows what it's going to be? People are going to love it. And maybe it's, Peloton of the world.
Exactly.
Yeah, jazzercise.
Or there's like this mirror now. Have you heard of the mirror?
I've seen the mirror, yeah.
I just read about that in a magazine.
That's wild, right?
Yeah.
But there's all that stuff. But again, the secret is just move your body for some time, 20 minutes a day, similar to meditation.
Yeah.
And we're simply talking about the people who have not kind of broken through, because there is this classic pattern that happens with anything, with any new habits. Doesn't matter if it's flossing your teeth or going for a run or meditating. There's this burst of excitement. I'm going to do it. I got my running shoes. I got my app. I got my headphones. I'm ready. I got my floss. I'm ready. And you're doing it for a little bit, and then it like starts to suck. You're like, this is not fun. It's not working. My mind's too busy. Running hurts. It's hot outside. I don't have time. All the things. But if you're able to make it through, and I'm not about to give you like a dosage or a prescription, but if you're able to make it through that initial friction-filled ramp time, you emerge on the other end stronger, and you get the runner's high. There is a penny drop moment in meditation where you're able to say like, oh my gosh, for the first time, I think I actually paused. I was able to like see my thoughts and feelings and come back. Yeah. The first dozen yoga classes probably were not fun. You're like, this is weird. I don't understand the language she's speaking. Like, oh, right. Yeah. It's the same stuff. So what I'm really interested in doing is like certainly getting people from 0 to 1 to do. But then there really is kind of the second hurdle, which is after you're doing, you have to get through that like friction-filled point where it's really not yet fun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're saying that, and for me, it's still like I still have better and worse days. Like even I go to yoga, and I have sometimes days where I'm like, oh my God, I just wish that 1 hour would be over already. Yeah. Even though I am there and I know why I'm doing it. And then I obviously have moments where like, I'm there and I could be there another hour because I enjoy it so much. So those frictions will come again and again. It's about being with them and being, that's right. And just kind of, again, observing it and being aware and knowing that will pass, that feeling or that friction will pass as well. And we'll still get stronger and happier on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there are like two schools of thought here. One is like, it's, march towards the goal. It's all about getting the trophy. It's all about the end. The other, which I kind of subscribe to more, is it's all about the process, right? Like commit to the process, do your job that you set out to do, employ your tools that that you love within your toolkit, and just do, right? Yeah. If you come out on the other end, to your point, and it was a horrible class, at least you did it. There's next time. Or if it was fantastic, at least you did it, right? It's like something that I heard in yoga specifically. I know this is kind of meandering, but think about just the act of getting here enough that you roll out your mat, and then at the end of class, you picture rolling it back up, right? The messy middle, the teacher, you have kind of a coach there to guide you. The teacher will guide you. You know what to do. You might fall, you might stumble, you're going to sweat, it might suck, your mind's going to wander, but really think about that kind of the process of rolling it and closing it back up. Because I also think, after reading Marie Kondo's, did you read that, The Magic Art of Heading Up?
I started listening to it. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. She and this is kind of a Japanese tradition and Zen tradition, so it's not hers only, but I think she often talks about that, and we've lost that, which is like a reverence for the stuff, the environments that we're in, and the tools that we use. Mm-hmm. Right, as opposed to saying like, I hate these clothes that I'm in, or, I don't love this pillow on my bed. Well, then find one you love, right? Like thank it for its service. What's that?
Change something about it.
Change something about it, and respect the tools that you have, right? Yeah. Sorry, I hope I answered.
No, that's
question.
great. I could go on forever. I'm already looking at the watch because you said that you'll have some guests that are coming tonight. So, but I have one more question before I jump into the last part of the interview. So you're working at Headspace for a little bit more than a year. I think a year and a half.
Almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years. Almost 2 years. So
I know because I started like right after my birthday.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay, great. So almost 2 years, very close to 2 years. And how can I imagine kind of the company culture to be like? Are people more relaxed and less stressed because it's Headspace and people meditate? Or do you think there's still a lot of also stressed out people that are not really following that or practicing that?
Great question. I think the culture is fantastic, and you might have there's no end to developing a great culture, right? Like even at your company, right, as you continue to build your company, it will certainly be mindful, and you're going to care for one another and be honest. But through having radical candor and through having integrity, you still come up against stuff, right? Like we're not all Zen.
No,
work has to be done. So I think in the modern day workplace, in most workplaces, you don't have the kind of transparent, honest conversations that we might at Headspace, because listen, we are very open with our personal values, our shared values.
Mm-hmm.
We communicate and collaborate and negotiate just like you would in any other kind of workplace.
Yeah.
But I do think it's still, at the heart of it, we're humans. And I think certainly one way to make people stressed is like stuff them all in a 4x4 box and expect them, to meet deadlines together. So let's talk about working at Headspace. It's fantastic, right? I think where it started is unique. It's not like we had investors who were thinking about venture cap funding out the gates, and were like, looking. They were two guys who were kind of struggling, and they swapped skills, and it started as an events company. Mm-hmm. So that kind of like honest, caring, very real community is built in the space. Mm-hmm. And Andy, as you might know, traveled the world. Kind of. What's that?
I've listened to him on that.
Voice, yeah. He is such a kind-hearted man, and was just interested in bringing some of the things that he learned back to the U.S., UK, U.S. Moved to the U.S. thereafter. And he started with like a one-on-one clinic, kind of coaching people through their stuff. Mm-hmm. Rich, who is our other co-founder, had a mutual friend, and Rich was burnt out. He experienced burnout before there was like a term for it, right? He was just like, I am exhausted. I can't go out of my house. I feel anxious, right? Mm-hmm. And a mutual friend said, hey, y'all should meet each other. I think, Andy, I know you don't know how to get folks, here where you're maxed out, where you have like a constant Rolodex of people coming your way. Mm-hmm. And Rich just needed some support. And then they met each other, and they said, wow, I think we really have something. And they started running seminars where they would rent out kind of like either rooms from churches or synagogues or hotels, and they would host like 1, 2, 3 day seminars, mm-hmm. Kind of like a Headspace live experience. Mm-hmm. And then there were so many people who said, hey, I couldn't, my mom couldn't make it. Can you burn this stuff on a CD? Mm-hmm. And they started shipping a lot of CDs. They found themselves spending all this time burning CDs. And it was fantastic timing. It was right when apps were becoming a thing, and the App Store was created. So Headspace was the first meditation mindfulness app in the App Store. So it was like a fantastic time. And I think we do a good job of blending rather complex things. We're talking about the brain and emotions and stress and all this stuff with these fun, animations, which are these like amorphous characters
Yes.
that bring a lot of this stuff to life. Yeah.
For sure. I really enjoyed it. Headspace was actually my first app and the way of how I got to experience meditation for the very
Awesome.
first time. And I am actually not a great meditator per se. I'd say I've been practicing a lot of mindfulness, and I'm doing it more through yoga. And I feel like I have a yoga teacher certification as well. So we were forced almost to practice meditation for 6 months during that time, and I had a really hard time, just as everybody else goes through this. Like, I had a hard time sitting. I was really frustrated. I felt uncomfortable. I thought it was silly too much my thoughts, all the things. But it's really interesting because I've been obviously learning about the subject for many years now, and I've done the yoga. I'm doing a lot of yoga. I'm a very physical person, and I actually have done a lot of yoga nidra, which is a full body relaxation exercise, more for almost sleeping. I've used it for sleeping for myself. Let's put it that way. Other people might just use it throughout the day, but I've used it really to fall asleep because I have a very busy mind. And now, 2 or 3 years later, after like those initial experiences on meditation and having all of that frustration, now going back to meditation, I actually find it really easy to sit and actually meditate if I'm going to a meditation group or something like that. And it's how they always say, there's no linear way to go to get to a goal. It's like you're going ups and downs, and you might not do something for 5 months. You totally will forget about it, and then you come back and you try all these different things, and then all of a sudden they merge together, and there you are, and you can sit in meditation. And for me, it was a lot of other mindfulness practices as well, of just being aware of what's going on in my body, what kind of thoughts do I have, and those kind of things. But yeah, just kind of from my own experience of how that came into my own life. And I think it's so powerful, and I love Headspace. I think it's amazing with the little stories and the little videos, and I think it's just incredible how they have put it together.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been quite the journey. I think you said something which was really beautiful in terms of looking back. Almost any course that we charted differed from like what we had planned, right? So it's funny, we consistently do this to ourselves, where we plan, we believe that to get from point A to B is going to look like this, but we know it doesn't. And every time ever in our life, it has always kind of meandered and changed. So it's funny that we still kind of struggle with that. It's just human nature, like always planning for the future and referencing the past, which gives us very little time for the present, as we know. Another way that I heard somebody describe it was, there are all these different doorways essentially into the same room. What we're talking about, and people have said like peeling the onion. I don't love that expression, because that does end, right, if you peel it enough. Yeah. I think what you're committing to, step one, is like being more aware and getting your own house in order.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because we live in a world where there's just like criticism flying around everywhere, in the news, on social, but very few people, I think, spend the time to get their own house, mental, physical, in order. Right. I certainly struggle with that as well. It's like very, very easy to look outside as opposed to saying like, hey, there's work to be done.
Yeah. It's so powerful. It's so powerful. Okay. A couple of final interview questions. Number one, what are you most...
Rapid fire.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What are you most grateful for? Thank you.
Yeah. So this is, I think, in the spirit of having a baby girl, my first girl, and a daughter, just the ability to love and be loved, and really those aren't even the best words to use, right? And calling all parents out there, you know what I mean? It's just, I feel so much love for this human who doesn't even yet know me. I mean, she recognizes me and it's goo goo gaga, but It's like I feel so supremely grateful for the ability to love her and feel the love that she gives me, and even more broadly, right? Like I feel similarly for people who I don't even know. When I if my wife ever sees this, she'll chuckle, because one of our first, I think it was the first time we went away together. It was just like us two. We get to this resort. I don't. It was local. It was like kind of a staycation of sorts. We walk by a couple, random couple, didn't know them, couple getting married, and we see like they're out in the foyer, and I felt that, right. Like I saw the father walking, the bride down the aisle, and I like started tearing up. And this is like my first experience with my now new girlfriend. She said, "Are you crying at this random wedding?" That's just who I am. It's like, no allergies, we're good.
Yeah.
No, but I owned it, right. And I think that's like something that we've lost, where we're able to look into our neighbor's yard and see them as us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
For
yeah.
sure. What are your 3 most important wisdoms that you would like to share with the rest
Yeah,
of
this like took me some time,
us?
because I wanted to be sensitive to, like, where I am now. Here goes nothing. Don't hold me to this. If we do a round 2, they
Okay.
might have changed.
It can always change. Yeah, for
It
sure.
can always change moment to moment, right? So number 1, we're all going through something, good, bad, left, right, up, down, sideways, and you're not alone in this, right? So if you have strength enough to look, there are all sorts of different support mechanisms there if you really, really observe. And I'm not saying you have to like climb mountains and traverse bridges and caverns to find this. I'm saying this stuff is right at our fingertips more than ever. I host a men's group in LA, which is just an opportunity to get together. And I call it like the news of the day, because I want to make the barrier to entry really low. But I think we've lost that, whereby we sit in a circle, like human beings just sit in a circle and talk freely, because inevitably stuff comes up. You might not have the initial plan that, oh, here's the stuff I'm going to talk about, here's the syllabus, but just through communicating and sharing what's happening today, healing takes place. And there's something about articulating what's going on in your brain to another potential friend or stranger that is a lost art. We're so often doing this texting or emailing. So it's nice to connect with you face to face and just talk.
Yeah.
So 1, we're all going through stuff. You're not alone. 2, and I kind of referenced this, but it's like a callback to something earlier. I firmly believe that there's no neutral ground here. We're either radiating energy or we're dissipating energy, right? You can either shine your light on this world in a very positive way, or not so positive. And we each have it in us to shine. I know we might be going through some stuff, but just know that there's always that light in you, and you can tap into it through practice over time. Yeah. And then the third, I would say, this is about like jumping into action. So I encourage everybody out there to take control of relationships in your life, problems in your life. The ball is always in your court, to use a sports analogy. So I've been doing this. This is just a little fun practice. Hopefully this is useful, but I've really cleaned up my favorites list on my phone. So AKA, like, it's really my up-to-date favorites. For a long time, it was like a legacy, group of people, but it's like 20 people that I really care about. And they're my favorites, right? I talk to them often, or I hope to talk to them often. And every week, once a week, Wednesday, good thing it's my birthday, I call them, not text them. If I can't call all of them, I'll leave a voice note. So on the iPhone, there's something next to the text box, which is like a little voice note thingy. And it's not speech to text. This is like you're actually speaking in. They hear your voice. It's something that has transformed a lot of my relationships just by reaching out.
Mm-hmm.
Again, no agenda. Hey, what's up? Thinking about you. I can't talk right now, but I love you and you mean the world to me. Let's catch up next week. Something like that, like really, really helps water the seeds of relationships, new and old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. That's awesome.
Those are my three.
Great 3 wisdoms.
Okay, good.
Do you have a book that you read maybe often, or that really inspired you, or that transformed you in some way?
Oh gosh, I want to say one, but I have like two, and the second is not really transformed me, but I like the way that this guy writes and thinks.
Okay.
It inspired me to think a little bit more directly. So the first is Siddhartha. I don't know if you've read that book.
Hermann Hesse. Who is it?
Yes, that's right. That was a book that I read. I think I had to do that in high school. And again, it is rather spiritual, but I think it opens your eyes to a lot of the truths are there, right? They're kind of timeless.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the tug and pull, or the struggle that we go through every day, can be alleviated by just realizing, you can think, you can fast, and you can wait, right? I think the majority of our peers, we're not starving, although we often say we're starving, we're not. Yeah. We live this life of immediacy, but you really can wait, right? Mm-hmm. And then you can think, right? That was the theme. I don't know if you remember. He was talking to the merchant, and the merchant's like, "What can you offer me? You have no silk, you have nothing." And Siddhartha said, like, "I can do these 3 things," and it proved like being more valuable than the jewels that this other guy had. So that's one that I think, again, it showed me something in myself that I hadn't seen before. The second book is by a guy named Michael Pollan. His most recent book is actually about like consciousness and meditation and psychedelics, but that's not the book I'm referencing. The book is called Food Rules, which he wrote a few books. One called The Omnivore's Dilemma, and the more recent in the food category called Food Rules. It's like 62 pages. Okay. And I really appreciated the way he wrote, which was in kind of directives. So I think many books, at least nonfiction, talk about philosophy, talk about connections and findings and stats, etc. Michael Pollan said, "Hey, if we believe these things to be true, like here's my thesis, here's what I value. Do these other things. Like here are my directives. I'm going to give you a prescription or a dose of exactly what to do. This is not a diet. This is just how to think about your food." Mm-hmm. Something as simple as like if you couldn't, if your grandma hasn't heard of any of the ingredients, it's probably maybe you should like second think the thing you're about to eat. Or like if it doesn't have an expiration date, you want to be eating things that expire. Basic things, yeah. But I thought it was beautifully written because he gave these directives. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So what's next for you? What are you doing? What are your big plans on that?
Yeah, raising a wonderful daughter, right? Who will just have an open heart and give back to the world and shine. That's one. And being a fantastic friend, as I was telling you. Friends, if you're listening, I'm calling you tomorrow on my birthday.
I hope you call me first.
Right, yeah, right. I'm on the East Coast, so maybe I'll get ahead of them. Oh, yeah. So Headspace for Work is rocking and rolling. I think that, that to me is certainly the consumer side is exciting, but I think Headspace Health, our kind of science arm, and then Headspace for Work are 2 things I'm deeply committed to. And we're having great success. So we've seen a shift in the market where it's not like HR just buying this perk or solution. We're seeing leaders, CEOs of multinational conglomerates interested in this in a way that they, at least in the 2 years that I've been doing this, I haven't seen. So I have seen kind of this like seismic shift in a big way around mental health, around conversations about just doing the right thing. EQ, the latest one that I heard was AQ. I don't know if you've heard of adaptability quotient. Like how adaptable are you? Adaptability quotient, which I thought was interesting. Again, it's like it's a spin on a lot of the same stuff, but I think people are looking for ways to be more adaptable, and I think there's a better way than focusing your attention and practicing awareness and compassion. A personal project I'm working on, just through some of the work I've done with my coaching clients and my own personal journey, is a program called The Next 100 Days, which I'm putting out. It's kind of Michael Pollan inspired me to put down directives. If someone wants to change their life, improve their life, find their passion, find meaning, tap into stuff that I think exists within them, I've put together 100-day breakdown of what I've gone through, just summed up into this like very short 100-day framework. So stay tuned for that. I'd love your feedback and anybody else who's interested. Yeah. So that's what I'm working on.
Great. So how can people reach out then to you or learn about the 100-day program?
Yeah, I'm available on all channels. IG, Twitter is NJ Savarick. So my first name, Matt, first initial M, middle initial J, Savarick, Savarick is my handle for IG and Twitter. Find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Matthew Savarick. The Next 100 Days, stay tuned for more info there. And then if you're interested in Headspace stuff, reach out to me, Matthew@headspace.com.
Great. Thank you so much. I am so grateful that we got to meet. I am so grateful to have you as well as one of my early testers for my 8-week online program on stress management.
It's been an honor. Thank you.
And I'm so excited that our ways have crossed, and I'm just infinitely grateful. And I hope that maybe one day I'll make it to your top 20 friends list as well. And really, I really appreciate this. And I feel like you have so many beautiful things to share. So thank you so much for all of that.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story. It's really, really important for people to understand that we're not superhuman, right? We are not machines that can just run forever. We have to look in the mirror sometimes and check in and love ourselves. We only get one body. So I'm deeply grateful for the work that you're doing. Keep shining your light.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. And wonderful.
Bye.
Bye-bye. If you enjoyed this episode, I would be extremely happy and grateful if you could leave me a comment and a 5-star rating. If you know someone who would benefit from the information I talked about today, please feel free to share it with them, no matter if it is your friends, your colleagues, and/or your family members. You will always find all links and a summary of the podcast in the show notes. It would be great if we could connect on Instagram or via email. You can find all details of how to find me in the show notes as well. In that way, you can also send me any questions that you might have. And as I mentioned, I also have a wonderful YouTube channel now where you can post comments and questions, so please reach out. I'm glad you're listening to this podcast. Thank you so much for your trust. With gratitude, Julia.